Dutch Army Centurions. Again, lots of countries in Europe, when we're allowed to sell the Centurion in the 1950s, end up equipping their army, which is undoubtedly with the best tank in the world at the time. This one with a 20-pounder gun. Now in 1950 the Korea War started and Britain was just at the point we were trying to raise money. We're a bankrupt nation after World War II. Selling tanks is a way of raising money. Unfortunately the countries queuing up to buy the Centurion, we're going to see a Swiss Centurion a little bit later on. Unfortunately what happens is because of the Korea War, we now need all our tanks for ourselves or for our immediate allies. So some countries, such as Switzerland, who ordered their Centurions in 1950, they don't get them to 1955. The Dutch start with a small order of Centurions. They're a NATO ally, that's good for us. We can supply them over and above people like the Swiss, who aren't a NATO ally at the time. So here they buy and they upgrade. Every country that buys a Centurion does a little bit of difference to it. So we can see on this one, the spare wheel hung off the back of the turret there, the searchlight, different countries at different times, white searchlight or sometimes infrared. White light for illuminating the battlefield, infrared if you've got infrared systems that can detect the light coming back. Now this Dutch Army Centurion did not get the gun upgrade. Some tanks later on, this has still got the 20-pounder gun on. Later tanks will see, if you have a look, you'll see those subtle differences between the different countries and those different tank guns. Now, one of the other things going on in the background at the same time as we're building the Centurion, we have a worry in the West that the Russians have got their JS-3 tanks in service. When Stalin dies in, I think it's, 51, 52, they changed the title of those JS-3 tanks. They're heavy Russian tanks, 122mm gun. They changed the title to T-10. Stalin gets forgotten about quickly. We are worried. We've seen a T-10 tank. What's coming next? We think the Russians are going to be building an even bigger tank. So in the background we start heavier tank programs. One leads to the Conqueror tank that goes into service in 1955 with a 120mm gun on it. What if that gun's not enough as well? We might need a 180mm, they think. Big enough gun to knock out the future Soviet heavy tanks. So this is why we end up with this beast coming on now, FV4005. It's really a testbed vehicle for that gun. A 183mm gun, the biggest gun ever fitted on a tank for direct fire roll. Now FV4005, it goes through a couple of iterations. They start by trying to design an assisted loading system because the rounds on this are so big they break them down anyway, the projectile first, and then you load in the case with all the propellant that's going to blast that round out the end of the barrel. They start by trying to come up with a sort of assisted loader system. Looked like it's an auto loader, it actually wasn't. And then there's this worry, what if this attack from Russia what if the threat from the Warsaw Pact comes sooner than we expect? So they come up with this second iteration. We might have been able to build these in a hurry should the threat start emerging quicker than we wanted it to. Hence, this is the second iteration of the vehicle with that cab on the top, that turret system there. They got it to the point they can angle that gun about 45 degrees either side of the centre line, so that it won't go fire sideways, because even with, you can see on the back there, they've got a ground anchor to anchor it into the ground. If you turn the gun 90 degrees, so much pressure, you'll probably turn the tank over. About 80 tons of backblast, they measure it as every time that gun fires. This one would have had 2 loaders in the back. You pick up the whopping great round. They're firing what they call HESH rounds, high explosive squash head. It's a round that's full of basically plastic explosive. It pancakes against the enemy vehicle and then detonates and sends a shockwave through the armour. They fire about 500 rounds from this vehicle in testing, so it's proven, but unfortunately the rate of fire, you can really, even on a good day, only get about 2 rounds a minute off of this, because the time it takes to load. 1955, they stopped the program, and the reason for that is 2 different reasons. One, in the background, it emerges that Khrushchev, now the Russian president, or in charge basically, he doesn't like heavy tanks. He stops the Russian heavy tank program. And the second reason